Grit, put simply, is perseverance and passion for very long-term goals. To say a few more words about it, grit is really about your stamina, how consistently you're working in a certain direction, and then how hard you're working in that direction. It is not about intensity. I've had young people come to me after talks and say, well, let me just tell you how gritty I am. I spent 72 hours without sleeping, and I did this amazing thing. And I congratulate them, but I say, so what did you do the next week? And how many years have you been working on this? So when we assess grit by looking at people's biographies, for example, we don't necessarily look for bursts of unusual productivity or effort, but we really look for constancy of effort over time. I have actually for several years been grappling with the question of whether virtues like grit are only virtues in the middle of the spectrum. So do we have something like the Aristotelian notion of the golden mean, where excessive grit as well as insufficient grit are both bad? I've lately come to the opinion, and I really is an opinion because I don't have data to support this, that it's not necessarily that you can have too much grit. What you can have is grit in the absence of other key virtues. So, for example, if you're an extraordinarily gritty person who lacks judgment or humility or honesty or empathy and kindness, you can see where grit could, magnify ill effects. But I don't necessarily think that it's the problem of being a 10 out of 10 on the grit scale. Let me start off by saying that in our research studies, for many outcomes like finishing West Point, grit actually is more predictive than IQ or SAT scores. But I think the real question is not, which is more important or more predictive? What it really is important to do is to highlight the undervalued role of effort. I feel like we live in a culture where we talk about talent all the time. In fact, I once was asked to do a media presentation, and they actually even refer to people as talent, as in, has the talent showed up? Did talent show up to makeup yet? Talent has to be on in 5 minutes. So this kind of obsession we have with, whether we are or are not gifted and talented, whether we do or do not make some talent threshold is misplaced. And if anything, I would hope that my research doesn't necessarily undermine talent, because I think talent exists. I'm not a particularly talented driver, for example. But we vastly underestimate how much effort, practice, time on task really determines ultimate performance. So resilience and grit, I'm often asked the question of sort of how does resilience affect grit, or is resilience the same thing as grit? I would say that resilience, if you would define resilience as bouncing back from adversity, that would be one of the things that would be a precursor to grit. But I don't think it's exactly the same, because if you're somebody who, when things are hard, you bounce back, that is one thing that you need to be gritty, but not the only thing. You also need a passion, right? You also need something that you're really committed to working on over the long term, and being resilient doesn't guarantee that.